Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 9 of Total Drama Pahkitew Island called Hurl and Go Seek. And this was another very good episode of the series. It's, I think, one of the stronger ones that's come out this season. Um, so let's just kind of get right into things. First of all, I gotta say, after this episode, I think I need to revise my opinion of Sugar a little bit. She's lasted a lot longer than I would have expected. And in retrospect, it does seem obvious to me that she's probably going to have more staying power than I originally had given her credit for. Simply because the manipulative jerk person every season always tends to last for a pretty good while. I mean, it was true for Heather, it was true for Scott. So, hey, that well, it's also true for Courtney, although she was never quite in Heather's league. But anyway, and I guess you could probably say Blaney counted for World Tour, but let's face it, we don't like to talk about Blaney now, do we? But anyway, so Sugar, as I said, has lasted longer than I expected. She got to do quite that amusing little song and dance number at this episode. Curious that she would reference the Food and Drug Administration, as that's an American institution, and this show is from Canada. I assume they have something that's equivalent in Canada, the Ministry of something or other. But the Food and Drug Administration is something you hear a lot about in, of course, the American media, which is, of course, quite pervasive in Canada, and it actually probably just simply fit the song better. So, yeah. Again, not really much beyond that to say about Sugar. Let's see, going on. The real thrust, I think, of this episode was the relationships between our two pairs of lovebirds, as it were, kind of coming to a bit of a head. In the case of Shawn and Jasmine, Shawn sacrificing himself apparently to the zombie horde, showed Jasmine that yes, he was sincerely sorry for what he'd done when he knocked her into the water, and that he'd really gone out of his way to prove himself. And basically you can kind of say that when you're looking at Shawn and Dave this episode, if you're trying to get with a girl, Shawn's the guy that does it right, and Dave is the guy that does it wrong. Now, again, let's keep in mind these are cartoon characters we're dealing with, so of course this is all very simplistic. But showing that you're willing to make a sacrifice for the betterment of someone that you care about, that's a classic. Now, Dave, on the other hand, let's keep in mind, one of the things that we have to remember here about Dave in this episode is that Krista even mentions that having eaten the juggy chunks can mess with your personality. So quite a lot of how Dave acts this episode would probably be attributed to that. And considering how germ-phobic and just simply not used to this sort of thing is, we can probably expect that the personality changes hit Dave harder than anybody. So let's just kind of go with the idea that Dave is not 100% in his right mind here. And what I like about the way things are presented here is that both Dave and Sky are kind of presented in being in the wrong. Yeah, there is a genuine attraction between Dave and Sky, and last episode, which I forgot to mention in my previous review, Sky kind of screwed Dave over a little bit, but Dave wasn't letting that keep him down, that he was really still into Sky. But here we see the Juggy Chunks again, and this has really become almost creepy in a way. But again, we could probably attribute that to simply the Juggy Chunks exacerbating what's already there. But the problem with Dave is, beyond liking Sky and being seriously germ-phobic, there's really not a huge amount to the guy. And basically Dave's a classic example of somebody, as I think I've previously said, somebody with some self-esteem issues who's just a little too wrapped up in a potential relationship. Dave is moving very fast, and he's not really in there to take no for an answer. Now, granted, the no for an answer is not something that Sky's really 100% behind. It's not what's in her heart, and Dave does realize this. But, when you get a no, well, let's not get too far into this. Otherwise, we're just going to be talking about the sort of stuff that people go on Tumblr to get outraged over for no real apparent reason. Yeah, anyway. Now, I did like that Chris even kind of points out that, yeah, Dave needed a slap back to reality, but Sky did it in the worst possible way. I mean, she basically flat out publicly humiliated the guy. If she'd really wanted to do this the proper way, it's like, Dave, let's go over here and have a private conversation. But, no, she did that there and just really ripped the guy's heart out and stomped on it in front of everybody. And while sometimes, of course, when somebody is kind of pushing you for something you're not 100% ready for, sometimes you have to be firm with them. There is, of course, a right and a wrong way to go about it. And again, I think we're just going to leave things at that. Otherwise, we're straying into talking about nice guys, and again, all the stuff that the people on Tumblr just endlessly complain and be like, no, I'm outraged. Yeah, man. Yeah. Can you tell that the outrage culture of the internet is not my favorite thing in the world? But anyway, we're here to talk about, cartoon teenagers, so let's just leave the ridiculous side of the internet aside and focus on, goofy Canadian cartoons. So, yeah. But anyway, just to kind of touch on Dave a little bit more. When I was watching this, one thing that really flashed through my mind was like, Dave, have you not seen the Scott Pilgrim movie? Or read the Scott Pilgrim comics, which, by the way, are quite good. And the great thing about the Scott Pilgrim movie is I love at the end, Dave, when Scott goes to save Ramona for the second time, he basically says, I'm not doing this for her, I'm doing this for myself. Scott realized that the motivation to be a better person really shouldn't have been to get Ramona to like him. It was because he should have wanted to become a better person simply because, well, that was what was best for him. And that's really what Dave needs to kind of get through his head, is that, if he really does want to have something serious with Sky, it can't be just all about, chasing after the girl and getting her. He has to really kind of do something that improves him as a person. But again, he does have the extenuation circumstances of, competing against her for $1 million. But anyway, that's something that came to my mind. Not really much else to say about what happened between Shawn and Jasmine, simply because that was a very cut and dry situation. But getting back to Max and Scarlet. Again, Scarlet is kind of emerging as a much more serious competitor. Her, technological skills are, well, basically kind of her technical skills and Max's barfing skills have led to a serious change in the status quo on the island. And, well, beyond that, though, it's a little hard to tell exactly where those two are going to go as characters. But, as I've said, Scarlet has much more of the qualifications to be the evil genius than Max does. So it would be pretty ironic if Scarlet decided to go off and, take over the world and drag Max along as her minion. It'd be quite a bit like Excel and Il Plazo, if you're a fan of, God, I can't even bring myself to call that old school anime, but let's just put it out there as that. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it's a show called Excel Saga that I guess probably came out about 10 years ago, and is really, really good stuff. So if you're an anime fan, you might want to hunt that up. But anyway, now that things are really going haywire on the island, let's definitely going to be interesting to see how everybody deals with that. And with that, I think I've said everything I really have to say about this episode. Again, good episode, really liking what they're doing, and again, this is sort of bring home what I've mentioned in one of my earlier reviews. Is now that they've brought it back to the islands and they're really just focusing in more on the characters rather than on crazy challenges, this has really strengthened the Total Drama brand. So let's kind of just keep that in mind. Anyway, guys, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter. I do have today off from my grueling schedule of job certification, commuting to the job certification site, and all this other crazy stuff. So I will be doing a live tweet of tonight's Total Drama episode, but that's about all that I'm going to be able to do probably until this weekend at the earliest, because Thursday and Friday are going to be absolutely brutal on me in terms of commuting and just being absolutely wiped when I get home from my certification testing. So yeah. Anyway, until next time, take care and have a good one.